One of the things that Steven said in his book is slow and steady for improvement rather than overdoing it.
Recovery is really important. Everyone talks about how important it is. Recovery is when the growth happens. It's not when you're actually going to the gym or when you're making a run. That's when you actually perform, but you're breaking down tissue. And it's the ability we have now with our technologies to be able to repair the body, starting with the mind and the physical side of the body.
You know, people say listen to your body. It's so cliche. Let's face it, if you really listen to your body, you'd sit on the couch all day and eat pizza and drink beer. But that's what everybody wants to do. We're not programmed for hard physical labor. And to force yourself to do this, it's a balance between having the self-discipline to do the work versus overdoing it.
Grit is built into it. Grit is literally a limited resource on a daily basis. It's tied to willpower and energy levels, and it's limited. You need state change to reboot it.
What does it take to do the impossible? What does it take to level up your game like never before? What does it take for individuals, organizations, for even institutions to achieve paradigm shifting? Nothing is ever the same again, breakthroughs.
Our mission is to decode the neurobiology of flow and cognitive peak performance. Access the minds of maverick scientists, groundbreaking innovators, and world-leading experts to understand what it takes to achieve ultimate human performance, so you can feel your best, perform your best, and accomplish your boldest goals. I'm your host, Rian Doris, and together with best-selling author Steven Kotler, I present to you Flow Research Collective Radio.
Welcome everybody to our podcast. So excited for you to be here. So the title of this podcast is Maximizing Recovery, a how-to guide for peak performance aging. And I can't think of three better people to talk about the subject matter than Steven, Dean, and Dr. Jason. They all come from different angles. So in this hour, we're going to talk about the 11 rules to do the impossible past 50. These are rules that Steven wrote up with his new book, but they're rules that will apply, pre-50 as well. So if you're 40, 30, whatever it may be, these are key rules as well. So in this hour, we're going to talk about training, recovery, motivation, sleep, diet, technology, and most importantly, mindset. It's all about the mind that controls the rest, in my opinion anyway. My name is John Bohan. I'm the CEO and founder of Revel. We're a music and wellness platform that helps you to unlock your best self. You can find more about us at revelforgood.com. And I'm going to go through some quick bios of Steven, Dean, and Dr. Jason. Dean Karnazes is a good friend of mine. We met probably about 16 years ago, and he continues to amaze me. He is he's amazing. He was named by Time Magazine as one of the 100 most influential people in the world for his superhuman achievements, including running 50 marathons in 50 days in 50 states. You can see the shoes behind him that he ran them in. He also ran 350 miles in 80 hours foregoing sleep, and he's a two-time New York best-selling author. So thanks for being with us, Dean. Steven Kotler is one of the world's leading experts on human performance. He's written 14 books. 11 of them have been bestsellers. His work has been nominated for 2 Pulitzer Prizes and translated into over 50 languages. And I have good news. His latest book, GNAR Country, launches tomorrow, and we're going to be talking quite a bit about that. And lastly, but not least, is Dr. Jason Wersland, who's the inventor of Theragun and founder and chief wellness officer of Therabody. Therabody is a pioneer in wellness technology, in the wellness technology space, and its purpose is to help people to live healthier lives. So let's jump right into it. You're all in the middle of these amazing careers right now, but it all started with one step. And so I want to go back early in your career and understand why you chose the path you did. And I think that's going to open up a lot of other things. So I'm going to start with you, Dean. Can you tell us a little bit about what happened on your 30th birthday?
Oh my God. Really?
Yeah, I walked out of a bar at midnight drunk and decided I was going to run 30 miles to celebrate. And I wasn't a runner. So I stumbled from San Francisco to a city called Half Moon Bay and somehow lived and decided I was going to quit my corporate job and become an ultramarathoner.
And so that's how your career in running all began, from that first step.
I blame it all on bad tequila. Yeah.
And then Steven, you've dedicated much of your work to flow. For those in the podcasts that have come in from other channels other than your own, do you mind describing what flow is and how did you start your journey in terms of studying it?
Flow is it's a scientific term. It's an optimal state of consciousness where we feel our best and we perform our best. And more specifically, it's any of those moments of sort of rapt attention and total absorption. We get so focused on the task at hand and what we're doing that everything else just starts to melt away and disappear. And all aspects of performance, mental and physical, go through the roof. And I started my career studying in a couple of different genres, but especially in sport, those moments in time when the impossible became possible, when feats that were supposed to never be done got done. And I wanted to know why. And across the boards, when you hear the stories, flow is the commonality in all of them. So it didn't matter what domain I was in. I could be in sports or science or technology or culture, wherever the impossible became possible. When you start talking to people about what happened, flow is always part of the story. There was other things going on, but flow was part of the story. It was the great commonality. So that was sort of where it started.
And you've written 6 books about flow and peak performance, all amazing. How would you say your last book, GNAR Country, which launches tomorrow, is different than the rest?
The GNAR Country is about peak performance aging. And so while it does talk a little bit more about flow, it's different in that it's very much focused on applied peak performance and applied peak performance aging. So it's the first book that does that. And it really, most of my books have talked about flow as an engine for peak performance. Here we look at one of flow's other sort of major roles in our lives as sort of one of the engines of adult development. Flow helps us grow up. It's part of the mechanism which drives us through adulthood. So I haven't really written a lot about that or talked a lot about that because it hasn't sort of fit the books I've been writing about flow. So I get to talk about those roles a little differently in this one.
Fantastic. And then Dr. Jason, you started Theragun back 17 years ago. What was the motivation for that? And tell us a little bit, for those people that don't know what a Theragun is, maybe you can describe that a bit.
Yeah, Theragun is percussive therapy. The way I discovered it is I'm a chiropractor in Los Angeles. I was on a motorcycle on the freeway splitting traffic as you do in LA, and the car cut me off and I T-boned the side of this Volkswagen head first. I ended up having a lot of soft tissue damage in my neck, down and through my arm. And what I was doing is looking for something that I could take with me to my house, on the road, in the car, something that was, let alone fit in my car, but maybe even my backpack. And there wasn't anything out there. It was really dependent on the modalities I had in my office. And in my office, it was mostly chronic issues. It wasn't really acute issues that we could deal with. So I sort of ran into this situation where I was like, you know what, I've got to either get surgery, take medications, and I didn't want either one of them. And I discovered sort of what vibration does to the pain in my body by sitting on a vibrating table in my practice. And that just led down this path of finding a tool that vibrated, that pulled against my body, and then realizing the vibration wasn't strong enough. So I created Theragun, the very first Theragun, like you said, in 2007. And it's been amazing ever since. It's the science we have behind it. It's been a pretty cool journey.
Very fantastic. So we're going to see how the company's evolved as well and some of the other products. But what I want to get into is Steven, your 11 rules from GNAR Country that allows anyone to do the impossible, as you say, after 50 years old. And I want to start with Dean, because Dean is still running 100-mile races at age 60, which just absolutely blows me away. And the first rule is train like a pro. Dean, how do you train? Can you just give us some insight into what you do to be able to not just run 100 miles, but actually race 100 miles more than one time this year?
Yeah, I mean, I look at myself through the lens of being the best animal that I can be. And everything I do revolves around that. So my training, obviously, my cross training, my diet, my interpersonal relationships, and my sleep. So all of those things I try to maximize and optimize to be the best animal I can be. As far as, how do I specifically train? I do a lot of smart training. So I use something called an elliptigo, which is an elliptical bike, so that I can get my heart rate up, but I don't pound my joints the way running does. And I also run primarily on the trails, so on a softer surface. I try to avoid man-made surfaces as much as possible. That said, I'm running the Napa Valley Marathon next weekend, so I still do run quite a few just road marathons as well.
So most of you how many ultras are you going to run this year? In other words, 50 or 100-mile races?
Probably about a dozen. I've got a 100-miler, the Rabid Raccoon 100 in a couple weeks, and then a series of 100-milers, and one that's 135 miles and 53-miler.
So Steven, I think Dean has tapped into the 11 rules of your book in order to do what he's doing. But you know what amazed me when I was reading parts of the book, Steven, is you were saying that, you know, counter to traditional conventional wisdom, you're mentioning that you can actually increase some of your brain benefits as you age. Can you tell us a little bit about that, and what are those things that actually get better as we age?
So the old idea about aging, right, is the long, slow rot theory. It's our bodies and our brains decline over time. There's nothing we can do to stop the slide. And this was the dominant theory of aging for most of the 20th century. And it didn't start to wobble until like the late 90s. But now there's holes in that theory you can drive a bus through. And the new theory is all the skills we used to think decline over time, they do decline over time, but we now know they're all use it or lose it skills. And if you continue to train these skills, we can hold on to them, even advance them far later in life than anybody thought possible. And I think, by the way, having Dean here is a great example. Dean will tell you, if you talk to Dean about distance running, that 60-year-olds and 70-year-olds are beating 40-year-old and 50-year-olds in some of the longer distance races, and have been for a little while, which is sort of one part of that. But we also, there's brain changes that happen in our 50s, and we gain new levels of intelligence, creativity, empathy, and wisdom that were not available before, which makes us, you know, better, smarter animals as well.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, I think your book, plus, you know, more and more people are reading about Tom Brady and what he's done. He's spending $300,000 a year on his body. And obviously, LeBron James just broke the NBA title for the most points. He's the best oldest guy ever. And he's 38 years old and scoring 48 points a game in some occasions. So this is possible. But what I think is really neat is that the technology that they're using in a lot of ways is out of reach for us. And also the wisdom that they get out of a book like GNAR Country is coming from their trainers and is customized. But what I love about what you're doing, Steven, in GNAR Country is you're providing the tools for people to use, to live by. And then also, Dr. Jason, you know, Therabody is super cool because, you know, you read a lot about the football players, et cetera, that are using these technologies, but they haven't been available to us as regular people. So could you tell us a little bit about maybe your sleeves or some of your technologies that will allow people to, you know, continue to perform at a high level?
Yeah, I mean, recovery is really important. Everyone talks about how important it is. My sort of mantra is recovery is when the growth happens. It's not when you're actually going to the gym or when you're making a run. That's when you actually perform, but you're breaking down tissue. And it's the ability we have now with our technologies to be able to repair the body, starting with the mind and the physical side of the body. This is our new G5 Theragun. We've done a lot of science on how it actually warms up a muscle in a proper way. A lot of science coming out about static stretching and how unhealthy it is for you to do consistently over time. It's been proven in a lot of athletics that it's actually leads to injuries. I was sharing this with Dean the other day, but we've got these new sleeves. These are calf sleeves. So it's actually compression. These go on the calf. It's graduated compression. So there's 20 millimeters of mercury down here of pressure, and it grows up to 30 millimeters of mercury. Has a really cool battery inside of it. This is great for runners. Dean, I was going to tell you, I was sprinting the other day with it, had it on full. There were 3 speeds. And when I got into my full stride, I couldn't feel the vibration anymore. The muscles were cool. It was crazy. And I had more gas to be able to do what I was doing. I mentioned to you, I run kind of in the same place on the Strand in Manhattan Beach, and I was shocked. We've also got the arm sleeves, but the whole idea behind this is having something on your body with the sleeves where you can do active recovery. So you're sitting at your desktop, you're traveling, you jump in your car after a run and you're driving back home, to be able to have something on your body that's actively helping the body recover, increasing blood flow. We spend a lot of time on the frequencies we work within and how that affects the nervous system, turning on the parasympathetic nervous system. Without that, you don't recover. And so that's where we spend a lot of our time, is focusing on the products and how they deliver the proper frequency to affect your nervous system in a positive way by turning on the parasympathetic nervous system. We all live in a sympathetic state for the most part throughout our days in our life, but having our products in your life gives you the time off and on to be able to check in with that lower part of your nervous system that we don't really access a lot, which is the parasympathetic.
Steven, do you want to add to that a little bit? I know you've written a lot about the parasympathetic nervous system, and I'm curious what your thoughts might be on what Dr. Jason has mentioned.
Oh, I was just fascinated by the science. I just wanted you to elaborate for a second on what you meant. You spent a lot of time trying to activate the parasympathetic. So is there certain kinds of percussion technologies that are better tuned for the parasympathetic reaction? How does that work? Is it going through the vagus nerve? What I'm geek. There's geeky, but
well, it's a lot of your receptor sites. So what we learned is using Theragun on your body for 2 minutes or more actually will turn on your parasympathetic nervous system. It runs at 40 hertz, 16 millimeters of depth. Those two combinations are what stimulates the nervous system over time. But I could actually use this on any of you for 30 seconds on a muscle area, move it quickly, and it'll activate your nervous system. So we have this activation part. We have a reactivation if you're running intervals, working out between sets, that type of thing. I took it skiing, had it in my backpack, pulled it out, had it going down moguls every 30 seconds or so, and just hit my legs, and it took away the lactic acid. So those are different types of ways to use that. But what you're talking about, Steve, is actually activating the nervous system. When I work on athletes, and I do it quite often, I know that when I get past that 2.5 minute mark, they're really coming down. Their eyes get heavy, their breath gets a little bit slower. It's activating the nervous system. So what I think, to answer your question, it's the frequency, which is around 40 hertz, which is at the low part of gamma, just the top of theta, and what that does to your nervous system. And I call these things a neuromuscular treatment device. It is percussive therapy, but the effect it has on your body is both muscular and neurological.
Oh, fantastic. Dean, have you experienced some of the things that Dr. Jason is talking about in terms of your recovery and how you train?
Yeah, I mean, I got my first Theragun, I think it was around 2010, and it's been, it's changed everything. And, in fact, my most recent book that came out in 2018, I write about running this race called the Western States 100-mile endurance run. And that was the first time I saw Theraguns in aid stations. And this woman hit my quad, and it got me back on course, and it got me to the finish line. So I'm a big believer, and longtime user.
Yeah. So, I mean,
and Dr. Jason, you promised me some of those calf sleeves.
Yeah. They're on their way.
Yeah, Dean, I think that your recovery is amazing. But, one of the things that I love about our past conversations as I'm trying to figure out how to get myself to the next level is you also said, don't negotiate with yourself. And as I was reading Steven's book, that was also one of the rules that he had mentioned, take choice off the table. So I'd love to hear Steven talk a little bit about taking choice off the table as one of the rules to perform at any age, I would imagine. And then Dean, would love to hear your thoughts on that as well.
So there's two sides to what I'm talking about there. One is in high stress situations. So I wanted to take in high stress situations, we make bad decisions, right? Unless you're extremely well trained at making good decisions in high, meaning you're a Navy SEAL kind of thing. As a general rule, it hinders decision making. So I want to have essentially rules for keeping myself safe that I create in advance of those high stress situations. And all I have to do in those situations is follow the rules because I'm not making good decisions. The bigger part to that is about goal setting and in what we know about the science of goal setting. But one of the most important things is when you create goals, and I don't care if it's your daily to-do list or, New Year's goals, resolutions, that sort of thing. If I call something a goal, if I say it out loud, put it on a to-do list, I will die before I don't accomplish it. Like, to me, a goal is a promise to myself, and I don't allow myself to break it. I take that option off the table. And one of the main reasons is the brain loves efficiency. It's always trying to be efficient. And if I never take, once I create goals, if I know I'm going to accomplish them, my brain will never stop trying to figure out what it takes to accomplish them. But the minute you start to wobble, the minute you don't accomplish all your things on your to-do list a couple days in a row, your brain, as soon as you add that goal to your to-do list, it starts looking for ways around it. It wants to save the energy. We're homeostatic creatures, and the first order of business is always conserve energy. So if you take choice off the table, it actually plays a huge role in terms of motivation and things like that.
And how do you set those goals? I mean, because different people have different goals, right? You want to bowl 150, for example, or in the days of Shane McConkey, you might want to do a double flip off the chimney and squaw when nobody's ever done that before. So there are different types of things that are just beyond your reach. And would you say that is a good way to set the goal, Steven? Because I think you had mentioned in another one of your rules is be aggressive, not stupid. So where do you draw that line?
Humans function best with 3 tiers of goals. We need mission level goals for our lives. And these are usually things that we cannot really accomplish, right? Like, or things that we are accomplishing, but there's no way to say, I want to write books that impact the world. Like, how many books I don't say, you know what I mean? I'm never really done with that one kind of thing, open-ended goals. Then you need hard goals. These are like 3 to 5 year goals, right? And then there's daily clear goals, which are daily to-do lists. And with be aggressive and not stupid when it comes to goals, the way I think about this is I always tell people is figure out how many things you can do in a day and still be excellent at all of them. And that's how many things go on your daily to-do list, right? This is like, you got to run the experiment for a couple of weeks in your own life, right? Like, I know on a regular day, like certain things I'm going to do every day, certain amounts of time, anything that takes energy goes on the to-do list. And like, you just figure out in advance. And I won't do anything that I can't try to be excellent at. I may fail, right? But I want to be excellent at everything I do. So I know that if I can't, there's no reason to put 23 things on my to-do list for the day because I can be excellent at about 11 of them. And then I'm out of energy and, it's got it. So I think about it those ways.
Fantastic. Dean, do you ever do that? I mean, I know you ran 350 miles once just to see the capacity of the human body, and you're raising money for charity. But how do you go about this? It doesn't seem like you set a limit on yourself.
Well, I mean, I think we're the sum total of our habits. So to Steven's point, I have a habit of never compromising. You compromise once and you compromise. You can't fool yourself. So if I have a goal for the day, especially a physical goal, I will not stop until I finish that goal. And it's going to be miserable and it's going to be ugly, but I'm still going to get it done. I mean, you guys probably know what a DNF is in racing. And I always say a DFL is better than a DNF. And DFL means dead fucking last. So it's better to come in dead fucking last.
Classic. By the way, I did not know what dead fucking last meant. So the acronym. So I'm happy to hear that. Dr. Jason, one of the things that Steven said in his book is slow and steady for improvement rather than overdoing it. And I was running hills just the other day, and I figured I'd crank out a few more hills, even though I was tired and my ego is saying you can do it. And then, of course, I was sore for 3 or 4 days afterwards. That was a little bit about, the problem with overdoing it, what happens to your body, and, whether you agree that slow and steady is the best way to go.
100% I agree with that. It's a marathon, not a sprint, basically. There's a couple of things I don't think you can compromise on, and it's hydration and nutrition, obviously. One of the things we've learned is the sooner you can recover after you've exerted yourself, meaning literally right when you're done, and not let the lactic acid and those toxins build up inside your muscles and your blood, then you're actually going to be better in the long run. So getting on that super quick is really important. But I think there's a fine line. You asked a question a minute ago about whether you're being crazy or aggressive. I think we have to be a little bit delusional. I think there's like this borderline of like being delusional about what your goals are and how you're going to achieve them. And I think I'm with you. There's times where I push and I realize I pushed it too much, but it's not that my brain couldn't do it. It was my body wasn't prepared with hydration or nutrition, and I didn't sleep good that night before. So I love that idea. I've been known to push it a little too much in certain aspects of my life, and I always end up paying the price. But I think the idea of slow and steady is great, 100%.
Yeah, slow and steady, Steven, but also, would you agree it's right at that edge of your limit where you're creating myelin in your brain and you're starting to improve much more? Would that, do you agree with that?
Well, you are definitely going for lifelong learning, mastery, and a sense of control, right? And myelination tends to show up when there's expertise or wisdom and you're, repatterning stuff. So I think that's true. With the slow and steady, the idea was, it was really like sort of a 1 inch at a time approach to like really difficult, challenging physical activities. And some of it has to do with sort of the challenge skills sweet spot, this idea in flow that we get into the most flow when the challenge is about 5% greater than our skill set. But in older adults, because of the impact of stress over time on our physiology and our psychology, that shrinks, and it's a little bit smaller. It's down to like 1 to 2%, and so it's just sort of acknowledging that can shrink and just staying in that sweet spot, mostly so you don't have the experience that we've been talking about, where you have to, you push it a little extra and take 4 or 5 days off. Those 4 or 5 days off just end up costing too much progress wise. So it was trying to work around. My natural instinct is to push really hard. I got one speed. And so like a lot of this was about like, how do I slow myself down so I can actually get where I want to go?
Yeah. Which leads me to my next point and another rule in your book, listen to yourself, which, I think maybe as we get older, we start to listen to that voice inside of us a little bit more that's telling us to do this, do that. And Mind Valley, another platform for health and wellness, talks about the power of intuition, and that your body actually knows. It's oftentimes your brain gets in the way. So I'd love to hear all of you talk about intuition, because we all have it. It's that voice that is telling us what we should do and sometimes what not to do. So how do you listen to your inner voice, Dean, as you're performing your different runs?
Not very well. I don't think there's much logic that goes into signing up for a 100-mile foot race. It's irrational. The other thing that I've become better at understanding is, people say, listen to your body. It's so cliche. Let's face it, if you really listen to your body, you'd sit on the couch all day and eat pizza and drink beer. And that's what everybody wants to do. We're not programmed for hard physical labor. And to force yourself to do this, it's a balance between having the discipline, the self-discipline, to do the work versus, overdoing it. And, in 3 decades of doing what I'm doing, I've never had an overuse injury. So far, so good. But I still think I pushed a little bit harder than it's prudent.
All right. Well, it's working for you, Dean, for sure. Steven, you're a big skier. You've done big wave surfing. What about your inner voice? Is that something you're listening to? And why do you make that as one of your core rules?
Well, interoception, right, which is just being able to detect the body's internal signals. From a geeky science perspective, correlates with all kinds of wonderful things, right? Like people with higher interoception skills. And by the way, when they measure it, it's usually the heartbeat test. Can you count your heartbeats in a minute, right? And but people who can do that perform better in pattern recognition. They're less prone to suicide. They're less prone to depression and mental illness and OCD and ADHD. And there's a lot of stuff wrapped up in our abilities to listen to our bodies on internal signals. For me, because I was teaching myself how to park ski, which is can be a very dangerous activity. I had to get really good at listening, being able to detect the line between fear, like there's a little bit of fear, which is good, and too much fear. And the minute your thoughts start to spiral, the minute fear starts to impact muscle performance or any of that stuff, I wanted to back off and come back later, right? It wasn't one of the things, this was be aggressive but not stupid. I didn't want, my ego was telling me to do something, or I didn't want to make those decisions because fear hinders too much of performance when you're doing dynamic, acrobatic, physical activities. It tends to block performance. So trying to push through that is dangerous. And with older adults, when you're dealing with a shrunken shell and skills spot, one thing layers on top of another, and it can put you in the hospital. So interoception was really important because I was trying to monitor fear levels so I could make decisions under duress without being stupid about it.
Dr. Jason, anything to add?
What came to my mind when you talk about intuition is I've worked a lot of my life to be able to understand when that's happening to my body. As humans, we think 60 to 80,000 thoughts a day, and 80% of them are lies. And to be able to understand what's happening in my mind and watch these thoughts go by, the intuition seems to resonate differently than some of the stories we're told. One of the things I learned along my path is the hardest thing and the right thing are usually the same thing. And the harder it is, the more BS your brain feeds you. And it's being able to get through that and find the real truth behind that. So for me, I think intuition is our superpower as humans. And I think it's our ability to really have something resonate with us in the right frequency. And the more you do it, just like anything else, the more you really start to focus and understand where that message is and what's right in certain terms and what's not right. But I love that topic. I could talk about this for a while because it's really been a powerful source for me when it comes to products, design, the purpose, how it supports people. So yeah, it's a big one for me.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that voice for me is never wrong. But we're going a little bit deep here. One of the things that you mentioned, Steven, as well in your book, is emotions or tools. Do you mind sharing a little bit?
Well, all our emotions are underpinned by certain neurochemicals, and they can be our allies. So one thing I was doing in the book is this is what I was talking about, but it works across the boards. I'm prone to vertigo. I'm afraid of heights, and I had inner ear problems as a result of Lyme disease. So if you put me above like exposed cliffs or things like that, the world will start spinning. Muscle control goes out the window, coordination, dexterity, it's all gone. And if you're a skier, you're above exposed. Like that's like, every other day, right? So something I had to deal with a lot. And I discovered at one point you can roar. And in the same way that in certain martial arts traditions, they'll shout when attacking, that roar produces testosterone, which actually brings muscle control back online. So I could get angry, faux angry on the ski slope, and the testosterone and a couple of the other hormones underneath it will just beat back the actual physicalness, the dizziness and the spinning and the muscle and the shaking of vertigo. So it became most of our emotions work that way, right? There's neurochemistry under them. This was one example that I was giving in the book, but it really was like, it was the most wonderful discovery in the world that, like, rather than succumb to vertigo, I could literally roar, which sounds ridiculous, but like it got rid of these horrific physical symptoms, and then I could do the dangerous thing I was trying to do in the first place.
That's so cool.
Do you actually roar when you're up there? You actually roar?
Well, so it happened accidentally once. I roared. I got so mad at this one point that it just happened, and it worked. And so then the next time vertigo showed up, I was like, oh, well, let's just try that crazy, stupid thing that just happened and see. And then when it started working again, I was like, okay, now I got to figure out what the science is under this, because this doesn't make any sense to me. And I was trying to figure it out, but it was, ultimately, other emotions work that way. Another one is, so curiosity and anxiety are actually share the same neurobiology. They're roughly the same thing. So you can use, and most mammals can't feel both emotions at the same time. So you can use curiosity to battle back fear. So part of the vertigo thing is I don't like heights. I don't like chairlifts. When I'm riding on a chairlift, which I do all the time when I ski, one way to sort of battle back against the fear of heights is to get curious about what I'm going to ski in the next run and what's going on below me. And curiosity will actually block the anxiety. It transforms one into another because it's roughly the same chemicals in the brain.
Yeah, that is fascinating. Because if you're in extreme sports, I don't care who you are, you're scared. If that wave's coming towards you and it's out of your league, maybe you just become curious about it, right? I wonder how long I'm going to be held under. I'm going to start thinking that instead of, how long can I hold my breath for? There's a comment here from Ann Myra talking about female tennis players grunting. I think male tennis players are grunting too, and that started with Monica Seles back in the day. And so, are we saying that channel your anger, and that's going to heighten your performance?
Anger, it's just every emotion is a tool, right? Anger is really, really, really useful. It's also really important to know when to put it down, right? Like small s spite is a motivator. When it becomes capital S spite, now you've got a problem, right? So those are, their emotions are tools, and you can misuse them or use them, I think.
Yeah. Dean, you are probably the mellowest guy I know. You're always in a good mood, always soft-spoken. Every time we interface, and I think it's because you just finished a 20-mile run or whatever it may be. But imagine, do you put your emotions to work to help you, and how do you deal with that?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm Greek, and you guys, this screaming thing to suppress your anxiety started with the Spartan. I mean, I don't know if you're at the Spartan rally, but Aru, 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 and then you go into battle, and it really works. So I howl at the moon all the time, especially when I'm cramping in the middle of the night on some impossible run somewhere. It's quite common for me to scream. In fact, this Badwater Ultramarathon, which is a 135-mile run across Death Valley, I remember my crew were shocked the first time I did this, and they, I was screaming at the top of my lungs. I said, I'm just doing it to placate some of my fear, because I'm like really in a bad place right now. And it works. It works. Try it.
It's also, John, there's also one other thing that's worth pointing out here. It's hard. So you can't move from like depression or despondency all the way to like joy or flow, some of those really top emotions. It's too big of a leap, and there are transitional stages. So anger is if you're really getting your ass kicked, as Dean was talking about, right, when he's like losing in the middle of the night, you can go to anger as a way to like then go up to flow or things like that. You can use anger or some of those other sort of as step ladders. There's a lot of energy there So as long as it's not eating you alive, you can work with it.
Yeah. That's really interesting. I mean, and the beauty about these rules, they just one moves into the next. The next one, rule 9, is use grit as a last resort. I think that's going to work well for Dean, but
I bet it absolutely does work well for Dean. So yeah,
okay,
Dean, all I was talking about is you and I, like I was doing I was trying to learn a very hard physical challenging skill. Grit is built into it, right? Like every day I had to show up and be gritty. I was going to be gritty anyways, but grit is literally a limited resource on a daily basis. It's tied to willpower and energy levels, and it's limited. You need state change to reboot it. So you want to reach for every other motivator you possibly can reach for before you decide to just tough it out, right? You want to reach for curiosity and passion and purpose and like gratitude, and use all those other tools before you just decide to tough. Sure, you could tough it out, but the problem is there's only so much of that you can do. And if you do that day in and day out, that's the only motivator. That's a recipe for burnout.
No, I mean, there's a saying, embrace the suck. And, when things get really tough, I say, how bad can this get? Can this get worse than the last time it was this bad? And I reflect back on a previous race where I thought there's no possibility I'm going to take another step. And somehow I kept going for 35 miles. So I really lean into this low point and see, and just say to myself, embrace it. Let's see how low you can get. Let's see how bottomless your depression becomes. And it's kind of a curiosity. And I think you're right. It kind of pulls you out of it.
Yeah, it's interesting how the power of words. Jesse Itzler, another ultramarathon runner, public speaker, has a lot of accolades to his name, talks about the power of words. The words that we use are incredibly powerful. How we speak to each other, what we say out loud, it shapes our future and it shapes our destiny. So I think that's something that I believe in quite a bit. And Jason, this is not one of the rules necessarily. I think it's intertwined within it. But what are your thoughts on that? Are you careful about the words you use in business and in life? Do you believe in the power of words, or it doesn't really matter what you say?
No, 100%. I think the self-talk is really important. I think it's important for us to understand who we are, what our human design is, and how to motivate ourselves. There's a book I learned when I was really young called I Am, and what the I Am is and what that is and who I am. And if I can build a language around that, then I'm feeding that I am. I think words are super important internally and externally. What you say out loud and what you're saying inside in your inside voice.
Thank you. And rule 10, never waste a flow state. Steven, I think, you could talk forever on this subject, but there most people on this call probably are familiar with flow, certainly the people that came in from your channel. And you described flow a little bit, but do you mind giving us a little sense of how one can get into flow? And so that you're in flow, because I've chatted with my employees about it. I chatted with my friends about flow. And I think a lot of people say, yeah, I'm in flow. I get in flow here and there. But then there's a whole nother level of flow when you're looking at Laird Hamilton jumping into a 60-foot wave or extreme athletes jumping into a wave. So are there various levels of flow? How do you get into it? And how do you know you're in it?
Those are all roughly tied together. So Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, the godfather of flow psychology, came up with the psychological definition of flow. The state has 6 core characteristics: complete concentration on the task at hand, the merger of action and awareness, the vanishing of self, time passes strangely, a sense of control, which is the internal version of peak performance, right? We don't feel we're performing at our best. We feel like we can control things we can't normally control. And finally, the experience is ecstatic or joyous. That's how we know if we're in flow. And to your point, you can be in micro flow, which happens to, like, that's when those characteristics show up, but they're like at 1 or 2. So you go to work, you sit down and write a quick email to a colleague, and you look up an hour's gone by and you've written an essay and, you know, where has time gone and got so sucked in. That's microflow. Macroflow is the sort of the opposite end of the spectrum. It's where all those things show up and they're turned up to 11. And then the experience feels mystical, right? Otherworldly. Time slows down and things like that'll happen at the other end. And, you know, flow states have triggers, preconditions that lead to more flow. There's 26 or 7 of them that have been discovered. They all do the same thing. They drive attention into the present moment. Flow follows focus. So if you want more flow in your life, the triggers all drive attention in the present moment. And that's sort of your toolkit for flow.
So when you know you're in it, just keep it, get rid of all distractions, stay in the moment, continue performing.
Well, I mean, when I was talking about never waste a flow state, I was 2 things. People who are new to flow, in a sense, especially macro flow states, flow produces a bunch of really feel-good neurochemistry, and it's easy to act like a stoned teenager. Like just, oh, everything feels great, and oh, look at the pretty clouds. You could do whatever you want, but flow is a state of peak performance, right? You're learning 240 to 500% faster than normal, creativity's through the roof, et cetera, et cetera. So I was on a quest, right, to learn a difficult skill, like never waste a flow state, right? This is maximize performance and learning so I can get the most out of my body and I can get the most learning done. That's what I was sort of talking about. And, you know, it's also knowing that, like, they're tight windows. Flow states don't last forever. So, like, try to maximize it while you're there and for the sake of learning. And it's, you know, a lot of this has to do with the importance of lifelong learning to peak performance aging, and how much flow can really, like, you can get a lot of work done in a lot less time in flow in terms of lifelong learning and the benefits it brings.
Do you feel that, Dean, when you're running? The endorphins are kicking in. I mean, I think most runners will feel that you wrote a book called The Runner's High. So talk a little bit about that, and do you feel you're in flow in those moments?
Yeah, I mean, if you read the book, you'll realize it right away, because I talk about losing myself in the moment. You know, I think that if you want to induce a state of flow, just go run for 24 hours. You know, we are human animals, and we are so removed from where we came from. When was the last time you watched the sunrise? You watched the sun all day move through the sky. You watched the sunset. You watched the moon rise. You watched the moon set, and then you watch the sunrise the next day. You get lost in it. There's no way not to get lost in it. So that's, you know, one thing I do when I'm feeling just overwhelmed is I'll just go run for 24 hours. You don't have to keep track of your time. You know, run fast if you want to, walk if you want to, get a latte along the way, whatever. Just be outside and moving for 24 hours. And you will experience flow firsthand. There's no way around it. And you know, the other crazy thing, you're talking about flow, I have a waterbed. So sleeping on a waterbed has really helped my recovery just because there's no pressure points. But at night when I'm stressed, I just kind of do a gentle wave and let the water lull me into a state of flow. It's self-induced, but it really works. And now I'm thinking I'll take my Theragun and put it on the bed and see if that'll actually get the right frequency to maximize it. Yeah.
That is awesome. Go run for 24 hours. Well, what if somebody's maximum running ability is a 5K? Go run for 24 hours, or just go out into nature and experience it as long as you can?
Just go out into nature and you know, it's like the Aboriginal concept of walkabout. You know, they just would leave and come back a few days later rejuvenated, you know, seeing the world through fresh eyes. So just walk outside in nature for just go watch the sunset, watch the sunrise as you're outside walking around, and you'll lose yourself in flow. You'll get absorbed in something grander than just you.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, all the technology that we have makes our lives a lot easier, but it takes us out of nature. And it should be a planned habit to be in nature. And Steven, you would agree with that. I mean, you wrote about it in your book, GNAR Country, and in the beauty of nature to, you know, revolutionize your state. Is there anything you want to share about the importance of jumping into nature?
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to summarize peak performance aging in a sentence, if you want to, like, kick ass until you kick the bucket, you want to regularly engage in challenging, creative, and social activities that demand dynamic, deliberate play and take place in novel outdoor environments. Novel outdoor environments are really crucial for peak performance aging. Both we know, so two reasons. One, time in nature lowers stress, right? 20 minutes outside, you're getting serotonin, activating the parasympathetic system. There are 9 known causes of aging, all of them linked to inflammation. Inflammation always links to stress. Anything you can do to lower stress, you're fighting age. And the second thing is, if you want to preserve cognitive function, right, you want neurogenesis and synaptic plasticity. So the birth of new neurons, and you want those new neurons to form new neural nets. The adult brain continues to give birth to new neurons, but what most people don't realize is that most of those neurons are born in the hippocampus, part of your brain that does long-term memory and location. It evolved. Dean was talking about we evolved to run long distances. He's totally right. We're hunter-gatherers. The brain is specifically designed to remember emotionally charged experiences in outdoor environments. So if you really want to maximize neurogenesis and synaptic plasticity, you want to be outside in novel outdoor environments fairly frequently. It's really, really important for peak performance aging.
Fantastic. So I'm going to, we have about 10 minutes left. I'm going to jump into questions in a second, but I do, those are the 11 rules, by the way. They're all in the book. So we did a nice synopsis of all of them. But we didn't talk about some other things that are key to recovery, key to performance. I want to talk about sleep for a sec, because for some time, it was very macho to say, I only slept 5 hours, only slept 6 hours. And then obviously a lot of the conversations around sleep changed. And one of the things that, you talk about, Steven, in the book is you list sleep as a key element. But Dr. Jason, can you tell us a little bit about the importance of sleep as it relates to high performance as well as recovery?
Well, I said this earlier on. If you're not recovering, not resting, you're not growing. There's no growth behind that. Sleep is one of the major keys. For me this year, my goal is to try and sleep 8 hours a night. I get 6 in and a habit of doing 6, but it doesn't really have the same effect on my life as a whole if I'm only getting 6 hours. So pushing myself to that point. I think it's also really important to understand how many tools there are out there that help us go to sleep, that sleep longer, our latency is shorter, the deep sleep, all these PPG readers we have that kind of indicate how our sleep is. Sleep is very, very important, obviously. I also think that it's the quality of sleep. And it's true, there are some people that don't need a lot of sleep, but I think it's important that they listen to their body and get the rest they need. We did a sleep study about 3 years ago on using products to get your body to sleep, to turn on the parasympathetic. If you're deep sleep, your parasympathetic is on, and that's really important.
And you have a product called goggles, sleep goggles that are designed to sleep. Yeah. Yeah,
we're called smart goggles. They actually have pneumatic compression, which is a massage on the eyes. And the really important thing is it's specific points. So it's your temples, the pressure point in your eyebrow. We all have that. And then your third eye. And how those things work together with the different vibrations that you're giving. It's great for migraines, but it's also super helpful to put your body into a state where you can get to sleep.
Yeah. Dean, can you tell us about your sleep habits and what you do to make sure that you sleep well each night?
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned the waterbed, and it really has been a game changer for me. I had a waterbed when I was a kid, and I just got a new one a couple of years ago. And water, you can't compress water, so there's no pressure points after an ultramarathon. Your body, one, has a lot of internal body heat, and two, you've got a lot of pressure points. So if you can minimize those, you're just going to inherently sleep better. And I have my wife won't sleep with me, nor will my dog, because I have the bed turned all the way to cold. We hear about sleeping in a cold environment. I actually have cold water against my, contacting my skin. So the waterbed has changed, the quality of my sleep. I've never been a good sleeper, but the waterbed certainly helped.
Yeah, and we have a question here from Dave that asks for 3 habits, protocols to enhance peak performance aging. So we've chatted a lot about those, but one of the things he mentions is nutrition or diet. Dean, can you discuss a little bit about your diet and what supplements you might take as well?
Yeah, I like to say if I can't pick it from a tree or dig it from the earth or catch it with my hands, I won't eat it. So I try to avoid anything that's processed or refined, anything in a bag. And, I eat a lot of organic food. Yes, it's expensive, but it's what I'm putting in my body. If I'm going to spend money on anything, it's going to be what I'm putting in my body. So a very clean, all natural diet. A couple things I do, I put fresh rosemary in my coffee grounds. So I brew fresh rosemary every morning. Rosemary has one of the highest ORAC values. So as far as antioxidant neutralizing properties of rosemary, it's one of the highest in the oil specifically, which come out in the hot water in the coffee. So those are a couple things that I do. I encourage people to try to, avoid anything that's in a bag.
Right. Steven, anything you'd like to add to that with regard to nutrition?
No, I don't. The only thing I'd like there's no one diet. We all eat well, drink lots of water, right? And Dean's rules are pretty much the rules, right? Like to avoid everything processed as much as you possibly can. The one thing I always like to point out when it comes to like peak performance aging, everybody thinks that diet and supplements is where people go. And most of the things that we really should be doing are either like moving our body or psychological interventions are much more important than nutrition. I mean, we know what the rules for nutrition are. You don't want to eat like a moron. But everyone talk about it, but it's the one of the least effective sort of levers we have. You get a lot of more bang for your buck out of a lot of other stuff, as long as you're not being really dumb around food.
What about
one of my mentors, a guy named Jack LaLanne? You guys probably have heard of Jack LaLanne.
Sure.
He said,
Yeah.
if man makes it, don't eat it, and if it tastes good, spit it out.
Classic. I'm going to bring up a potentially controversial topic, is alcohol. Because you mentioned in your book, you said no booze or zero booze. What's your stance on that, Steven and Dr. Jason?
So mine's for me, booze is particularly impactful. The research is really clear. There's research that shows red wine can be useful for anti-aging, and there's other research that goes on the other side of it. For me, it impacts. There's studies that say after 2 glasses of wine, it really it degrades the quality of your REM sleep, and it blocks deep delta wave sleep. I find that happens after more than like half a glass of anything for me, and I'm particularly susceptible to sugar. And anything that blocks delta wave sleep is going to block learning. So if you're embarked on a learning quest, which is what I was on, right? It doesn't matter what I learn during the day. If I don't get deep delta wave sleep during the night, it's not going to move from short-term holding to long-term storage. So alcohol really tends to mess with sleep a little bit. And I'm very susceptible to it. Some people aren't, but I am. And I notice a huge difference in my performance. And I'm a fan. I like bourbon. I like scotch. I wish this wasn't true. I'm a fan.
Yeah, I'm a sucker for a good margarita. But every time I do that, I wake up in the morning and I'm like, that's just poison. It's just toxins to my body. It doesn't make me feel better the next day. So for me, if I can focus on how it's going to feel tomorrow or later in the afternoon or later in the evening, that usually was what kicks me past that. And I just grab a couple of glasses of water. I've tried switching from, tequila to beer, and just none of that. It doesn't rest well in my body. It doesn't. My sleep numbers change. Back to what Steve was saying, my sleep numbers change. I don't have the same sort of numbers that I do when I'm just drinking water. Alcohol's, and it's a tough one, man. There's so many different places you go. Everyone has that. It's always out there. But for me, staying focused on how it feels when I don't drink is my motivation.
Great. Thanks so much, guys. I couldn't agree more with all of that. We're wrapping up a little bit. There are a couple of questions here. Melissa, if you want to get the socks, go to Therabody.com. That's Jason's company, Therabody.com. I think Steven's teams has included in the link. There is a question here from George T about heart rate. Dean, I know you're religious about measuring your heart rate. Can you chat with George T about whether heart rate training really matters?
I mean, how much longer do we have?
Yeah, not long.
I've been doing these, John, I told you, I've been doing these crazy runs, not long runs, like 5 mile run at tempo. So just sprinting as fast as I can for 5 miles, breathing only through my nose. So it's like forced hypoxic training. And yesterday my heart rate was at 209. And, I should be dead, right? But I'm very much believe in pushing my heart up. Try it. Just try nose breathing. Try it for a mile or two.
Dean, by the way, I've been nose breathing while I hike over the past.
Oh, nice.
I had COVID in early January, and as part of trying to come back and get my VO2 max back to its upper, I've been hiking and nose breathing. I can't even imagine what sprinting and nose breathing is like. I don't even know what that is, Dean. That's your own private Idaho. But I'm with you on the nose breathing for VO2 max.
And Dr.
Really.
Jason, he's a nose breather as well. Yeah, we talked about this. Yeah.
Great stuff. Well, thank you, gentlemen. This has been an amazing conversation. For those of you that are interested in getting Steven's book, if you pre-order today, there's an amazing offer. Go to narcountry.com. I think his team is putting links in there. If you buy the book for $29, you're going to receive $1,750. That's $1,750 in value. Or if you're like me, you're going to buy 10 books and give it to all your friends so you can enjoy life with them for even longer. And if you do that, you actually get $4,000 worth of value. You can also find out more about Mr. Badwater himself, Dean Karnazes, at ultramarathonman.com. Dean also just started a new running company called Greek Running Tours. That's Greek Running Tours. What a great combination, running through Greece with a guide from Greece. Be fantastic. And then Dr. Jason, again, his company is Therabody.com, where you can find the cutting edge technologies for wellness. Thank you, Steven Kotler. Thanks, Dean Karnazes. Thank you, Dr. Jason Wersland. I had a blast. Hope you did as well.
Likewise. Thanks, you guys.
Thank you, everybody.
See ya.
Really fun hanging out.
If what you've heard on Flow Research Collective Radio has been helpful, please consider doing us a solid and leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you are listening to this. Reviews help us connect to a wider audience so we can get these peak performance principles out to more people.